coming to our true crime week in July. This is our fourth year doing this. Every year it gets a little bigger and better. Today we have Minnie Martin. She is the author of Snake Eyes, and she's also got an upcoming book that is on the presentation. She comes from Hot Springs, and she talks about, this book is about a murder case that happened in 1960. Anyway, thank you for coming, and Kitty, thank you for coming, and let's give her a hand.
Thank you all. Can you hear me? I don't know if this is working or not.
Let me go back here and see.
Let's see here. Hello? No, it was working earlier. Can you hear it now? Okay, hi there. Thank you all for coming. I want to thank April Frost for inviting me to come speak at Abington Library's True Crime Festival this year. My book, Snake Eyes, Murder in a Southern Town, has been waiting a lifetime to be told. It's the story of our, and I'm saying our, that's my twin back there. I'm an identical twin, and that's Mitzi. I'm Biddy. Our real names are Julia and Juliet, but our friend died in 1966, and it was a murder cover-up by a killer who terrorized our town, Hot Springs. Now, Hot Springs was America's spa because of our thermal waters. We're famous for the Art Deco bathhouses. Have y'all been down there and seen the bathhouses? They line downtown Hot Springs on the National Park side. They've been there for over 100 years. Tourists would come to Hot Springs, and they'd take baths and have massages during the day, and at night, they'd be across the street at the bars and the casinos and the clubs. Gangsters came to Hot Springs. You all may know some of this, but they would come from Chicago and New York during the winter months. That was really when Hot Springs was booming. And they would come to bathe and golf and go to horse races and gamble, and Hot Springs was neutral territory for them. It was a place of shelter for the likes of Al Capone and Lucky Luciano and other mobsters. Now here's Al Capone and a few of his friends at Happy Hollow, and that's where I get my water now, our thermal water. I go up there to Happy Hollow. It's behind the Arlington Hotel. That's Al Capone, the second one on the left sitting down. His brother's in the picture, and I can't figure out which one is his brother. Who do y'all think it is? I don't know. It's either the one on the far right or the one next to him. But Al had a favorite chair, and it was donated to the Historical Society in Hot Springs. And there's a plaque on the chair that says Al Capone would request this chair whenever he visited the Southern Club on Central Avenue. And that's the Southern Club on the front cover of my book. But I'm not here to give you a history story, but to show you the comparison of the notorious mobsters to Frank Davis, who was the killer in my book. Hot Springs, this is Frank Davis. Hot Springs welcomed the gangsters with wide open arms, but they were frightened to death of Frank Davis. Our 13-year-old friend, Kathy Ward, would go to his ranch on June 24th, 1966, and never return home. Davis would tell the deputies that she fell off a horse and was dragged to death. But people who knew Frank Davis knew he was a skilled horseman, and he could have caught that horse. Kathy had a dysfunctional childhood after her mother left her father in Murfreesboro, and she brought her and her two siblings to Hot Springs, and this is the home they lived in on Prospect. It's about 2 blocks from our home. Kathy wrote a paper for her 5th grade substitute teacher that said, "My father is a doctor, but can you hear me? I think it just gave out. But anyway, she said, my father is a doctor, but my parents divorced and I miss him. I like it here now that I'm making friends, but I don't like being here." She was talking about Hot Springs. Did you get that fixed back there? Thank you. Her substitute teacher was Mrs. Tracy, our neighbor, and she's the lady in the blue dress in this picture. And Miss Tracy was so touched by Kathy's paper that she stuck it in her purse and she took it home and she hid it in her bedroom drawer. Maybe she was going to give it to Kathy's mother to try to get her help. We don't know. Kathy was a good friend of Mrs. Tracy's daughter, Leslie, and that's Leslie with her father. And Leslie and Kathy would skateboard down the hill in our neighborhood. Now, here's Mitzi and me, and we lived across the street from the Tracys, and that's the Tracys' house behind us. You can see it there. Leslie and Kathy were a year younger and a grade behind us in school, but that didn't matter. We were all friends just the same. Kathy came over to skateboard with Leslie on Father's Day, June 19th, 1966. Everything was finally going Kathy's way. She had blossomed into a beautiful teenager. She made good grades. She played the piano and the flute. She was in the band, and she was also good friends with the popular crowd. Now, this is something I found out through research. Kathy had a lot of boys that had crushes on her. I didn't know that until I started talking to a lot of them. But her new boyfriend at this time was the quarterback of the junior high school across town. We went to Central. We were the Spartans. Her new boyfriend was the quarterback of the 7th grade team, handsome Mike Langley, and he was a Viking across town. And that was very daring and unconventional back then because you just didn't date anybody. You didn't date across school lines. You dated somebody in your own school. Now, when Kathy left Leslie's house that Sunday afternoon, she forgot her skateboard. Here's a picture of it. Maybe she was in a rush to get home to talk to Mike, her new boyfriend, the quarterback. But Leslie found it in the side yard there by the hill where they were skateboarding, and she took it and hid it out in her side yard, and she called Kathy that night, and she said, "I'm going to church camp tomorrow with the twins, and we'll be back Friday, and you can come over and get your skateboard. It's in the side yard in the bushes, but I'll see you Friday, and we can go skateboarding." But they didn't know that would be the last time they'd ever talk. 5 days later, Kathy was dead. It was front page news. The newspaper said the deputies were called at 3:48 p.m. Friday afternoon about Kathy's accident. And then it told about her funeral that was being held at 1:30 Saturday afternoon. So that was less than 24 hours later. So who had time to grieve? Kathy's fatal accident at Black Snake Ranch was hard for all of us kids to understand because we'd never had a friend die, especially so tragically. Our parents nor our teachers talked about it. Her family didn't either. But we did hear rumors that Kathy had been raped and murdered. All of us kids were scared to death, and here's Leslie and me. We were at Leslie's house. And I didn't know it then, but Leslie had something under her bed, hidden, that would be the key that would eventually unlock the mystery of Kathy's death, and it was a skateboard. It was hidden underneath there. And Leslie told me, she never told me about that skateboard until 2014, after a spooky event happened on the 48th anniversary of Kathy's death. And that's when I knew Kathy wanted her story told, and the story about how we figured all that out is at the end of chapter 1. Parents wouldn't take their kids out to ride horses at Frank Davis's Black Snake Ranch, and his friends stayed away too. Frank was married to his 4th wife, who was half his age. She was 19 years old when they married, the very day that his divorce was final from his 3rd wife. And of all places, he drove his Sharon up to Murfreesboro to get married. They had a quickie wedding up there. And I didn't realize this either, the Murfreesboro connection, but there was a big one in this book that I found out from researching because Kathy's mother had just left Murfreesboro and brought the kids down to Hot Springs. Frank Davis was married 5 times, and he had 5 children by his last 3 wives. Now, you may think he was a ne'er-do-well, but he had a college degree from a Texas university. He was a co-pilot in World War II. He was a crop duster, but he used his mother like an ATM machine. He was an only child, and he was spoiled rotten, and I really believe that his mother is who created this monster. Frank sweated out the investigation of Kathy's death, and less than 3 weeks later, it was ruled an accident. However, Frank's life imploded in the fall of 1966, and the worse it got, the more his mother pampered him, shelling out unbelievable amounts of money for her son's compulsions. And I'll tell you this, it's in the book. He bought 3 cars in 1 week. She paid for them at the Ford dealership. Now, who does that? But he always had to have his way. And when he couldn't get it, he relied on his mother to make things happen. And by the way, this pond's here because there was talk of Frank having drowned a little boy in the pond. And supposedly it was one of the, he had a lot of foster boys that worked out on his ranch. They were ranch hands. And supposedly one of those little boys saw something. He saw what really happened to Kathy, supposedly. But I could never find a newspaper article to confirm that drowning. So everything that I heard was all talk. But Frank's misery all came to a head one winter evening in 1967 at the Redbird Laundromat on Central Avenue. This is right across from the racetrack there. The building's still there. But this time he committed murder in blood, cold blood, and there were witnesses, thankfully. Frank Davis's name became front page news, but then it all became kind of fuzzy. Did he die in prison for the second murder? Was he ever convicted for Kathy's murder? I'm talking about Kathy's friends, we didn't know, but we remembered there was something, there was a twist at the end of the story that no one saw coming. People are still afraid of Frank Davis, as they were back then when I was interviewing. In fact, there were several that wouldn't talk to me because they didn't know if he was dead or alive, and neither did I, so I was just as frightened as them. He had threatened everyone from the judge to the jury. It was scary. Stories of Frank Davis's murders have been told like scary folk tales over the years, and social media has only made them larger. Now, Snake Eyes was released in May 2022 by Prometheus Books. And I had a book signing at the Central Theater, which was right around the corner from our Central Junior High School. And it was packed, and it was very appropriate because Central Junior High was where so many of us last saw Kathy 3 weeks before she died when we went to pick up our report cards that year. The auditorium was packed with friends from all over Arkansas and around the country. We had people from California all the way to Maine. Now, Betty Jo Tucker, that's Betty Jo on the left, and then Kathy. Betty Jo had been invited to go horseback riding that day with Kathy and two friends. But Betty Jo's father wouldn't give her permission to go because he knew Frank Davis, and he didn't like the man, and he didn't want his daughter anywhere around him. And Betty Jo's always felt that if she had gone that day, that Kathy might still be alive today. And I invited Betty Jo up on the stage at the book signing, and this is what she said. There's been a hole in my heart since my good friend Kathy died, and if you've never experienced that, especially as a young child, you don't know how it's going to affect you for your life. The first thing I ever told my husband was about Kathy Ward and what she meant to me and how much her death meant to the whole community and what a big loss it was. At the end of the book signing, we had a remembrance for Kathy. Her photo was up on the screen, and the audience sat quietly as we listened to It Is Well With My Soul by the Nashville Studio Singers. And that was our closure because we didn't go to her funeral. I only have one friend that I know of that went to it. We said, who went? And none of us knew about it. I mean, that's how hush-hush everything was back then. But I didn't know until I looked at the pictures that Kathy Ward's little sister and Frank Davis's, the killers, his son, were sitting only rows apart at the book signing, and both of them live elsewhere. They don't live in Hot Springs. And Leslie, that's Leslie on the left, and Betty Jo on the right. Well, that's Kathy's sister in the middle. That's Ruthie. And they met at the book signing. And that's the first time I ever met Ruthie, too. And the reason why is when I interviewed her father, Dr. Ward, in Murfreesboro, his wife told me, his then wife told me that, oh, Ruthie doesn't want to have anything to do with the book. So I honored that request and I didn't contact her. And the first thing that Ruthie asked me at my book signing was, who told you I wouldn't talk to you? And I said, well, your stepmother, Janice. So I learned a lesson about that. I wish I'd had Ruthie's viewpoint in the book. However, I was able to interview her brother. I was out in California the winter of, it was either 2017 or 18, and I remember that Dickie Ward lived somewhere near LA. So I Googled his name and up popped a number and I called it. It was his number. He answered and he agreed to an interview. So I drove down to his house one Sunday morning south of LA and we talked for hours. Then when the book came out in 2022, Ruthie was talking to him about it. He didn't even remember talking to me. They're all brainiacs. All the Ward kids were. But he told me in that interview, though, I asked him, I said, tell me about going to Kathy's grave. Do you remember going there? He told me, no, he didn't ever remember visiting her grave. I thought that was real strange. But then later in the interview, he said, well, I was back in Arkansas in 1992 when their grandmother died. So he said, I guess I saw it then. Well, Kathy Ward's grandmother died in 1992. And she lived 26 years longer than Kathy. That's awfully sad. But I found these pictures of Kathy and Ruthie in the Murfreesboro yearbook, and that's Kathy in the first grade and little Ruthie in kindergarten. And there's Kathy. That's her last school picture in the 7th grade. She'll forever be 13. And that was Ruthie. I took that picture in 2022. So I can imagine that's how Kathy might look now. But Ruthie told me that she was 10 years old when Kathy died and 18 when she found out it was actually a murder. Every year, Leslie and I take flowers to Kathy. Well, Mitzi goes with us too. She probably took this picture, but we go to Kathy's grave on the day she died, June 24th, and this was the first time that we took Kathy's skateboard with us. We took several photos, and I was looking at them later, and I saw this one. Now look at that shadow that starts down there at Leslie's feet, and it shimmies up beside her. It's kind of like energy when you're having a storm and your TV, picture jumbles. That's what I imagine. Energy is energy. I know what I think about this picture. I don't know what y'all think, but it's never happened before or since. Here we are another year. We always know where we're going to be on June 24th. It's like a holiday. We didn't even miss during the pandemic. It would be very traumatic if we couldn't be there on June 24th to visit Kathy. And in 2022, I took the book. And we had a memorial. There's Ruthie and their cousin said a prayer, and we had a little mini service there at the cemetery. And then, like all celebrations, we went to a restaurant there in Murfreesboro and ate and sat for hours and talked. And then 3 days later, I was back out at Black Snake Ranch with Frank Davis's son, the killer's son, Bo. Like I said, he lives on the East Coast. But Bo was a baby when all this happened, so he didn't remember Black Snake Ranch, and he wanted to see it. And the now owner happened to graduate from high school with us, and nice guy, and he said, sure, bring Bo out here and I'll tour him around. And so here we were touring around Black Snake Ranch, and it's a beautiful piece of property. But Bo only knows what happened from what his maternal grandmother told him, because she's who raised him. His grandmother, his mother's mother and sister who raised him and his brother. And she told him it's either us or the Davises. So he never met Grandmother Davis, never knew her. And he, of course, never met his father. But when he refers to him, he never calls him father or dad. He'll say Frank, but he did tell me that he drove down to Texas and spit on his father's grave, and that's in the book. Yeah. But one thing that I found out that I never realized would happen is that I thought that I would write a true crime and I would just connect the pieces together in this story. But what I found out is that both Bo and Ruthie have used, and even Betty Jo have used the book to process the past and begin to heal. And that's good, I think, and I never expected that to happen. And so that's a great benefit to come out of a true crime. And there have been many strange occurrences since the book was released. Betty Jo found out, she started doing some research on her family tree and found out that she was possibly kin to Kathy Ward by their great-great-great-grandfathers were kin somehow. Now, that's crazy. But then another thing that happened is Mitzi and I and her daughter and granddaughter, we were in Savannah, and right around the corner from our Airbnb is the Catherine Ward house. Now, that was spooky when I saw that. Now, I've been very grateful to be invited to festivals. I even spoke to the Hot Springs Book Festival before my book had even come out in 2022. Now, I've given several book talks to several groups and book clubs, and then here's one that was really a lot of fun, and I bet no other author in America has ever had a beauty shop book signing, and I did. It was so much fun. But you see that lady with the curlers in her hair? Guess what? I didn't know this. Her husband, who's deceased, was a juror on the Frank Davis trial. Now, is that crazy or what? Yeah. Wow. But I think fate dictated the cover of my book. As a preemie twin, I spent the first 6 weeks of my life downtown in the nursery at St. Joseph's Hospital, and I'm sure the nuns were rocking me every night while the Southern Club was rocking down the street. And a few years later, here's Mother and our big sister Sarah. They were taking us on a stroll downtown, and back then there were street photographers who would take pictures and they would sell them to you. Stone Cypress did that. And this picture was taken not far from the Southern Club. But I remember as a kid, Daddy would take the family on a drive through downtown, and Mitzi and I'd be in the back seat of the car. And every time we'd reach the Southern Club, Daddy would point up at the sign, and he would say at the can-can girl, and he'd say, if her legs are kicking, that means the coast is clear. Come on in, because gambling was illegal back then, and that was their sign. Yeah. But we finally walked in the front door of the Southern Club when we were 10. We were about 10 in this picture. Mother and Daddy had taken us to see their movie star friend, Gail Robbins, who was appearing at the Southern Club. She would sing at the early dinner show, which we went to down in the bar and grill downstairs at the Southern Club. But at 10 o'clock and at midnight, she would appear on the stage show upstairs. up there. Can you believe they had midnight shows in Hot Springs? Yeah, but of course you can tell which one is Gail, the one that looks Hollywood with our parents. But decades earlier, Gail had sung with swing bands and orchestras in Chicago before a talent scout discovered her and took her out to LA, and she became Betty Grable's understudy at Fox Studio and met my parents while she was on a movie hiatus. They were in Hays, Kansas. This is Mother and Daddy with our big sister, Sarah, who was much older than Mitzi and I. And Gail had come on between, movies. She was on hiatus. Her husband, Bob, was an engineer at the plant where Daddy was a manager, and they decided to get married. So they asked Sarah to be their flower girl. So they got married. Then Gail went back to LA and went on to make movies, I guess. But in the mid-50s, this is our parents then, our parents took Sarah out to Hollywood to appear on Place to Face with Gail, and that's our big sister then in the white hat. She was a teenager then. And then Gail came to Hot Springs in August of 1961 to perform at the Southern Club at the stage shows, which I told you about. And here she is saying goodbye to Mother and Daddy out at the airport in Hot Springs. But I truly believe that all those years ago, when Daddy was pointing up at that sign at the Southern Club, he was really saying, Biddy, someday you'll write a book about Hot Springs, and that'll be on the cover. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you all for being here today. But before I go, I'd like to give you a preview of my new book, Killer Wife, The True Story of Bonnie Conley and the Men Who Died to Love Her. Now, this is another 1960s Hot Springs true crime. My publisher says, Joe Conley's life ends with a bullet on a visit to his estranged wife, Bonnie Conley, in April of 1959. Handsome Tommy Hunter weds Bonnie in 1964 and is fatally killed 11 months later by a shotgun blast. Don Rowland, 21-year-old dance floor king of Dugan's Oasis Lounge in Hot Springs, Arkansas, marries 45-year-old Bonnie in September 1968. Then, after his violent death from a pistol and claw hammer on a November 1969 night, she declares him the victim of masked intruders. In Killer Wife, Biddy Martin untangles the mysteries of Bonnie's many fatal loves for the first time, featuring gripping storytelling, in-depth research, and interviews with victims' family members. This page-turning true tale of murder is the only account of the attractive Southern woman who preferred a bullet to divorce. Now, here's the only photo that I could find of Bonnie, and it was from her wedding announcement in 1941. And the FBI had to use that when she killed her first husband. Well, there's more to this story. But anyway, that's the only photo of her. She was camera shy from a very young age. But Bonnie, just like Frank Davis, had become a household name after her first murder. And there were three that could be pinned on her. And you saw the three husbands. But there was another one after that I'll talk about in the book. Killer Wife is coming out spring of 2027 by Prometheus Books. And I want to thank you all again for inviting me here today. And Kathy Ward continues to live through you. When you see her and if you read the book, you're keeping her alive. So thank you so much. And I'd be glad to answer any questions about the book or about the new book or about being published. But thank you all so much. Thank you. Are there any questions? That's not the title I gave. My publisher changed the title. Some people love it. Mine was going to be Black Snake and Redbird, Murder in a Southern Town and a Southern 60 Town, but my acquisitions editor wanted to call it Snake Eyes. He thought it was more appropriate to the story, and some people love it. I didn't necessarily. So my new book, The title sticks, no changing, no nothing. Yes. So that's kind of the story. I think so. I think so. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Research and writing a book's a big undertaking. What's your background?
What's my background? You won't believe it. I have a degree in marketing, and I also have a degree in nursing. But I was in the media. But my first job out of college was in research, Arkansas State Parks and Tourism, and I love research. And I don't have an MFA. And so my next book, my publisher loves my next book because it's actually better written because I've learned how to write from writing my first book, but I don't have an English background at all. But I love to research, and I love connecting the dots. So did that answer you, Justin? Any other questions? What? Oh, there's a blurb on the book by Bill Clinton because he grew up in Hot Springs. Yeah. Yeah. But there's a blurb from him on there, but he's also in the story, and his mother was in there also, and father-in-law. But I just like writing Hot Springs stories. So thank you all so much.